Bell P-39 Airacobra. The Airacobra had one of the strangest designs of the war. Its engine was mounted behind the pilot instead of in the nose, like a mid-engine sports car. It looked futuristic, and it had a big 37mm cannon firing through the propeller hub, which sounds amazing in theory. In practice, it had almost no performance above medium altitude because it lacked a turbocharger, which made it useless against high-flying German fighters. American pilots weren't big fans. But here's the twist. The Soviets loved it. Most of their air combat happened at low altitude, exactly where the P-39 actually performed well, and Soviet pilots racked up serious kill counts flying it on the Eastern Front. So depending on who's telling the story, this plane is either a disappointment or a hidden gem. Context really is everything with this one. Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. The P-40 gets a mixed reputation, and honestly, that's fair. Early versions struggled at high altitude and couldn't match German fighters like the Bf-109 in a straight fight. But give credit where it's due. The Flying Tigers made this plane legendary in China, painting shark teeth on the nose and using hit-and-run tactics that played to its actual strengths, like a strong dive speed and rugged airframe. It wasn't winning because it was the best plane in the sky. It was winning because smart pilots figured out how to use its strengths and avoid its weaknesses. Think of it like passing a tough exam, not because you're a genius, but because you knew exactly which questions to focus on. The P-40 stuck around for most of the war, proving that solid tactics can make an average plane look a lot better than it actually was. Bell P-63 King Cobra. The King Cobra was basically the Airacobra's bigger, more refined sibling, but it arrived a little too late to make a real name for itself with American forces. It fixed a lot of the P-39's problems: better performance, better handling, stronger armament. But by the time it was ready, the US Army Air Force already had better options rolling off the line. So where did it end up shining? The Soviet Union again, where it became one of the most heavily supplied Lend-Lease fighters and saw serious combat use against German forces. It's one of those planes that never really got its due credit in American history books, mostly because it showed up right as other flashier fighters were stealing the spotlight. Solid plane, unlucky timing. The story of a lot of underrated WW2 aircraft. Grumman F-4F Wildcat. The Wildcat wasn't fast, it wasn't sleek, and it definitely wasn't going to win any beauty contests next to a Japanese Zero. But it was tough as nails, and toughness is exactly what the US Navy needed in 1942. At Midway and Guadalcanal, American pilots flew this thing against faster, more maneuverable Zeros and still managed to hold the line, largely because of superior tactics, like the famous Thatch Weave, where two Wildcats would cross paths to cover each other's blind spots. It could absorb serious damage and still bring its pilot home, which built enormous trust among Navy aviators. It's basically the reliable Toyota Corolla of World War II fighters. Not flashy, not exciting, but it refuses to die and gets the job done every single time you need it to. Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Now we're getting into serious hardware. The P-38 looked unlike anything else in the sky, with its twin boom design and twin engines, and pilots either loved it or struggled with it. There wasn't much in between. Its firepower was concentrated right in the nose instead of spread across the wings, which made it incredibly accurate at range. It had the speed and altitude performance to hang with German fighters in Europe and the range to escort bombers deep into enemy territory before better options came along. In the Pacific, it became an absolute legend. It was flying P-38s that intercepted and shot down the aircraft carrying Admiral Yamamoto, one of the most important single missions of the entire war. Distinctive, powerful, and genuinely one of a kind, the Lightning earned its reputation. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Nicknamed the Jug because it looked like a flying milk bottle, the P-47 was an absolute unit. 8 machine guns, a massive radial engine, and armor plating so thick that pilots would come home with half the tail shot away and still land the thing safely. It wasn't the most graceful fighter in a tight-turning dogfight, but that was never really its job. It excelled at diving in fast, blowing things up on the ground, and getting out before anyone could react, which made it one of the most effective ground attack fighters of the entire war. If a P-47 got hit, it didn't dodge the bullet, it just absorbed it and kept flying, like a middle schooler taking a dodgeball to the chest and refusing to go down. Pilots trusted this plane with their lives, and it rarely let them down. WW F4U Corsair. That bent gull-wing shape wasn't just for style points. It let engineers fit a massive propeller without needing absurdly long landing gear. Japanese pilots nicknamed it Whistling Death because of the eerie sound it made diving into combat, and that nickname alone tells you how feared this plane became. It had a rough start with nasty stall characteristics that caused a string of accidents during carrier landing trials, which actually kept it off carriers for a while. But once pilots learned how to handle it, the Corsair became an absolute beast in the Pacific theater, racking up an incredible kill ratio against Japanese aircraft. It stayed in active military service for years after the war ended, which says a lot about how ahead of its time this design really was. Grumman F6F Hellcat. The Hellcat was built with one specific goal: beat the Japanese Zero, no excuses. The Navy studied a captured Zero in extreme detail and used everything they learned to design a fighter that outgunned, outpowered, and outarmored it in almost every category, and the results speak for themselves. The Hellcat is credited with something like a 19-to-1 kill ratio against Japanese aircraft, which isn't a fair fight. That's a bully showing up with better mouth and a bigger engine. It became the primary fighter of the US Navy for the rest of the Pacific War, and pilots who flew it consistently rated it as one of the most trustworthy, forgiving aircraft they ever operated. Sometimes the best design philosophy really is just figure out exactly what beats the enemy, then build precisely that. North American P-51 Mustang. And here it is, the GOAT, the plane that changed the entire direction of the air war. Originally, the Mustang was actually kind of mediocre, held back by an underwhelming American engine that struggled at high altitude. Then, the British suggested swapping in a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, and suddenly this plane could outfly, outrange, and outfight nearly everything the Luftwaffe had in the sky. What made it truly historic wasn't just speed, it was range. The P-51 could escort heavy bombers all the way from England to Berlin and back, something no other Allied fighter could do at the time. That single capability completely changed the strategic bombing campaign over Germany, because bombers finally had full protection the whole way in and out. It's basically what happens when America and Britain stop arguing about tea versus coffee for 5 minutes and actually build something together. That's 10 of America's most important WW2 fighters, from the plane pilots dreaded to the one that arguably helped win the air war outright. If you had to climb into the cockpit of one of these and fly into combat, which one are you picking? Drop it in the comments, and if you enjoyed this one, hit like and subscribe for more.